Sorry.
Maybe it's just the earphones.
Are you not hearing that on yours?
I am hearing it.
Yeah.
But when you move the earphones, it goes away.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the Settlers of Seoul podcast. I'm your host, Arias Dare. This episode's guest is Wesley Chang. Wesley is a native of Guatemala and lives in Seoul as a filmmaker and photographer. He studied visual communication design at Hongik University and does various freelance creative projects in addition to his 9-to-5 as a professional marketer. In this episode, we talk about the Spanish-speaking community here, what it's like working in a Korean office space, and go deep into Korean design and what it takes to be a photographer here. All right, let's get right to it. Hi, Wesley. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi. Where are you from, Wesley?
I'm from Guatemala.
Guatemala. Are there many Guatemalans living in Seoul?
There's a decent-sized student community. I'd imagine there's a handful of people who stayed to work after graduating, but as far as just people who have been living here who weren't initially students, very, very few people.
I see. So most of the, say, Guatemalans, and would it be fair to characterize the Spanish-speaking community as mostly students?
As far as Spanish-speaking, I don't know, because there's a lot of Kyopos from Spanish-speaking countries now, and so they grew up there, so they're native speakers, and they have the culture as well, so I don't think they can be separated from the Spanish-speaking community.
You grew up in Guatemala City, as I understand, correct?
Yeah.
Now, are there many Koreans there? What is the Korean community like?
There is a pretty big Korean community now. I'm not sure how many there are at this point, but it's still a relatively new community, so they're still kind of closed off. Like, the parents of my friends they came from Korea, so either they never learned the language or they only barely know it, so only their kids know it. So they never really mixed in with the people or haven't done it that well yet.
What was it initially that brought Koreans over there?
Mainly running clothing factories.
So the Korean community is kind of centered or clustered in Guatemala City, primarily in the textiles business or their small, medium-sized business owners.
Yeah.
What is the reputation that Koreans have in Guatemala? They've
kind of built themselves a bad reputation with a lot of people. I didn't know this until there was a time, it was after high school. I was just on this trip, in this group tour, and I met this woman who her job was to make sure that Korean factories are following certain like safety standards, stuff like that, following all the rules. She had some pretty bad stuff to say about Koreans, so that was my first time hearing that. It's not that they're all bad, but a few people abuse the system, break the rules, sometimes people when
Koreans and breaking the rules. I've never heard that in the same sentence.
Yeah.
Ever.
And then when people are in a country that's not their own, they feel like the rules apply even less to them.
Now, in terms of cultural assimilation, I mean, do Koreans have a reputation for kind of staying in their own little cliques and their own little communities, that they don't make an effort to integrate and to intermarry, to learn the language? Or do Koreans actually mingle quite well?
They don't mingle very well with the locals. Their kids kind of do, but they still they go where their parents bring them, right? So they meet other Koreans at church and they speak Spanish and stuff, but they're still very much among themselves, and only at school will meet with other people, but their closest friends tend to also be Koreans.
Well, I understand some of your close friends were Korean as well, and that was actually kind of how you first got exposed to the country and the culture.
I suppose being half Chinese had to do with me fitting in better with them. Not like them accepting me, but just me better understanding them and therefore being able to fit in better.
So let's clarify. You are half Guatemalan and half Chinese?
Chinese-American Guatemalan.
Chinese-American Guatemalan. Yeah. Could you clarify?
My dad's side of the family is Chinese, but he was born and raised in Guatemala, as well as my grandma. So I don't know what generation my grandma is, and my grandpa came from some part of China. I don't even know anymore. But my dad had moved to the States when he went to college and then lived there for a while. That's where my mom's from Michigan. I was born in California, but at the age of 4, we moved to Guatemala, and that's where I grew up.
So when you were a kid, I mean, did you grow up speaking, or let's say not even just speaking, but just did you have any interest in your Chinese background? I mean, obviously you're here in Korea, you've been here for several years. Why are we not having this conversation in Beijing or Shanghai?
When I was really young, I didn't know I was half Chinese. I knew that we had Buddhas in the house and we ate Chinese food and ate with chopsticks and had all these Chinese decorations.
Sounds like typical Guatemalan household to me.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought. I mean, I grew up with it. I knew my grandma was Chinese. I knew my dad was Chinese. I didn't know I was Chinese. So I was really kind of in denial of it. When I was really young, I liked to identify as an American while I was in Guatemala, kind of realized, and then I was really cool with it, and then I just started identifying more as Asian.
Do you think that change in identity, or maybe that kind of acceptance, or maybe not acceptance, but at least awareness and acknowledgement of your background, do you think that made you more open to connecting with the Asian community in Guatemala City?
Yeah, definitely. My friends ended up being Korean because my school was full of Koreans. My grade had like 2 Chinese kids. So if there would have been more Chinese, more likely I would have ended up hanging out with them. When you're in Latin America, Asia is so far away that it kind of becomes its own category, right? The same way over here, the West just is like its own thing. You can barely, like, people here can't distinguish as well from like different European countries, let's say. So for me, it was just like, cool, Asians. I have something in common with them, and I wanted to learn more about their culture, and just thought it was cool and interesting.
So at what point did you start to take the language seriously, or at least take the option of moving out here, as a real step forward for you?
It was probably 10th grade. I was at a Korean friend's house, and he was just telling me about his last summer trip in Korea and found it fascinating. And then he said, you should come next time. I'd never thought of it. Like, I just never even thought of leaving Guatemala and live in another country before. That was just like a trip. But I never thought of even going that far. My dad just happened to run into an old friend who knew somebody who was on the scholarship that I came on, the Korean government scholarship.
That's the KGSP scholarship,
KGSP.
Right?
They told me about it, and so I started working toward that scholarship, and I ended up here.
Now, was Korean culture at all salient where you came from? I mean, were people watching Korean music videos and TV dramas or anything like that?
Not at all. Just the Koreans.
And now?
I remember the first time I went home after being 2 years in Korea, and Gangnam Style was playing everywhere in Guatemala. I was really surprised. But it was still like people had no idea what it was, and people didn't know what it meant, and like half the people liked it, the other half were like, can we get over this already? It's stupid, I don't get it. There's probably more of it now, like smaller, I guess, like Korea nerdy type communities, like the same there would be for anime and stuff like that.
Otakus or something.
Yeah.
Korea, I think, what is this scientific term? Korea-boo.
Yeah, but it's not mainstream. Like, you really won't see it much.
So what year did you first come out to Korea? You came out here as an undergraduate student on a KGSP scholarship, correct?
Yeah. So I came here in 2011, end of February 2011. Yeah.
What kind of student did you see yourself at this time? Were you really planning on staying here for any amount of time? Was it just kind of a curiosity thing, like, hey, let's just explore Asia and see what it's like? Or did you have any type of long-term career interest that you really focused on and that you really wanted to get the ball rolling with?
Some people on the scholarship, they come like, it's 5 years, it's a lot of time, but then they're like, after that, I'm going to go home. I already had the idea that at the end of the scholarship, I am going to go anywhere but home. And I hadn't thought of it. It was my dad who at one point told me after I'd gotten the scholarship, like, my life as I know it is over now. My life at home and all that and living with my family, that's pretty much over now, and that after I leave, I'm never coming back to that. And I'm not sure if it ended up like that because he gave me the idea or because he knew it was going to be like that, because, I mean, he also left home to go to college. Wherever I end up, it's not going to be Guatemala anytime soon.
So living in Seoul was really kind of a reset button for you, kind of a new start.
Yeah, completely new start. I mean, life here is not at all like life in Guatemala. I didn't even know life could be that different.
What were some big differences that you remember in 2011?
When I came here, I was lucky compared to other people on the scholarship because I had my high school friends here who helped me up. They showed me where to get things and stuff like that. One of the first things I remember was the bathroom, where the shower was not a separate piece. My first month, I was in this really crappy dorm that had a terrible heater that I also didn't fully understand how to use because all the controls were in Korean. I never even thought that the showering experience would be that different. Riding the subway also changed my life because I couldn't get around in Guatemala without help from my parents, or like after I was able to drive a motorcycle, even so, I didn't know the city that well because I needed to know how to navigate it. And here you just look at the subway map and get around. So that gave me a lot of freedom. The safety changes your life. Like back home, it's dark. It's time to go inside.
Now, is that the entire city? Are some parts better than others in Guatemala?
I mean, there are parts that you wouldn't even want to go there during the day, but just overall at night there isn't anything to do anyway. It's gotten better, but still, unless you're going to a late movie or someone's house or one of the few clubs and bars, there's really, like, everybody goes to bed at 9, 10.
We actually just interviewed a woman from Moscow on this podcast, episode 4, for those of you who'd like to check it out. And she has a quite unique experience, I think, coming from the West, but not in the way that I do, right? And I'm curious what your thoughts are on being a Westerner, but a non-native English-speaking Westerner, at least in the eyes of your typical Korean. When you introduce yourself as a Guatemalan or a Chinese Guatemalan, what kind of reactions do you get?
Confusion, because most people don't know anything about Guatemala. If they've heard of it, they've heard of coffee. And
I mean, that's good, right? Koreans do like their coffee.
Yeah, but like that's all they know. If they do know anything about Guatemala, they look at me and they're like, the hell? You don't look Guatemalan. But most people do see me as a native English speaker. I mean, I am, and I guess they can hear it.
So I assume you have a U.S. passport then, or correct?
Yeah.
And so on all your registration, you can basically register as an American.
Yeah, but I don't.
You register as a Guatemalan.
Yeah.
And still that you don't run into any difficulties, or at least none that you've been aware of.
In Asia, as a Guatemalan, I seem to be able to get around just as well, if not better than as an American. I do it mainly because I'm registered as a Guatemalan in Korea, and it makes it easier coming back into the country when I'm traveling. But the main way that would come up would be traveling, and with the States, countries either love them or hate them. So you can either get in easier or they make it way harder for you to get in. So I mean, I went to China and it made way more sense to go as a Guatemalan because it was like 6 times more expensive to go as an American. I have seen very little benefit at this point from being an American.
And do other Spanish speakers or Latin Americans have similar experiences? Because you seem pretty positive about the whole thing.
Yeah, well, I am treated as a white person. Some people will notice that I'm half Asian, but they'll still see me more as a white person. Discrimination doesn't happen as much with where you're from, but the color that you are. Story of my friend, we went the same day to change our visas.
Where's your friend from?
El Salvador. So like our countries are right next to each other, not that different. We were on the same scholarship. We studied the exact same thing at the same university. We're changing for the same visa. And for him, they required more paperwork and it took a longer time to process his visa, which just doesn't make sense.
Now, do you hear similar complaints from other Spanish speakers? Maybe, let's say, darker Spanish speakers?
My friend from El Salvador, actually, his graduation project was related to stereotypes and discrimination. So he printed these cards, and it said, just because I am blank doesn't mean I am blank. And he just had people write out stereotypes that they experienced in Korea because they were from that country or they were something, mainly because of the country they're from. And we were in Haebangchon just trying to ask strangers to participate. And we asked this African guy, I'm not sure exactly where he was from because we didn't get the chance to talk, but we asked him if he wanted to participate, and he said, I can't be in that mood right now. Like he didn't even want to bring it up. Yeah, other things that I've heard about on the subway, people don't want to sit next to you, stuff like that. It doesn't happen to me, but it has happened to people I know.
Yeah, similarly to you, I'm also mixed race, Asian and Caucasian, and I hear a lot of stories like this. I hear these typecasting and diminished expectations, and I've never personally experienced that, at least as far as I know. I have had a very positive experience living in Seoul, and Peter Ward, who was on episode 3 of this podcast, he just very, very plainly puts it. It's because you look Asian. You're non-threatening.
Oh, actually, I just remembered a story. A friend, Korean, we were going to go meet another friend to go biking, and we were a bit late the friend we were meeting was from Kenya. She didn't know this. And then I mentioned it. And then she started to get really worried because she just really never personally met any black people in her life. But she started to freak out that he was going to be angry at us, and then the situation was going to get unpleasant because the only thing you would see about black people if you've never met them is from the media, and it's very often not a good thing, especially if you watch Hollywood movies. In the end, we met. She realized he was cool. And then for her, that was kind of a beginning of a slow process of getting over that. Doesn't have that racial bias toward black people anymore. But that initial experience was shocking to me, that she would just freak out about meeting a guy because we were late and he was black.
On a previous episode, we talked a lot about the KGSB process. So I'm not so much interested in that. But what I'd like to know is, where did you study and what was the program like as a non-Korean?
So I studied at Hongik University. I studied visual communication design. Hongik does not have a lot of international students.
What is the international student size or population there?
Like in total, I wouldn't know. But for our major, which was the biggest major in the university, there was my friend Pablo and I. Like 2 years later, there was an Italian guy.
So 3?
Yeah.
Really? Just 3?
There might have been someone else, but I don't remember seeing anybody else.
That's a bit surprising because the area around the university is one of the most diverse international areas, and that's where everybody goes.
Yeah, but like if you're going to come to Korea, I don't see why Hongdae would be your first choice. Like there's a handful of exchange students that come every year. There's a small handful of graduate students, but didn't really get to meet them.
What was your experience like as a student? You said that you can't really understand why anybody would study there, but overall, you spent 4 years there?
Yeah, 4 years there.
Yeah, what was the program like?
It changed over the course that we were there. It became more English-friendly at the end. Even though I speak intermediate Korean, it's still very, very difficult to get through college in Korean. The students there, a lot of them really had no experience with foreigners. I even met one girl who said she had never seen a foreigner in real life before she saw Pablo and I.
Did she run away screaming with her hands in the air?
I guess we weren't easy to approach. Tried to be in the beginning, but it just kind of got exhausting because we were too different from everybody else, and I suppose they didn't know how to deal with it, so we couldn't be more than just like a monkey at the circus. I remember being at the orientation, which was surprising because I thought it was going to be an orientation, and it was just a bunch of drinking and partying.
Well, clearly you didn't know Korea yet.
No, I did not. I mean, they called it an orientation. I thought we were going to learn about the university, and then learned nothing.
No. We're going to learn how much you can drink.
Yeah. But like people were friendly to us, and they would approach us and talk to us. Nobody was like, I want to get to know you as a person. It was more like, you're fascinating because you're a foreigner. And that was kind of it. Even though there was people who spoke English, I really didn't fit in that day. I think that made everything worse as well. But
now, what about the administration and the faculty? I mean, were they receptive to your needs?
Well, the international office did a very good job helping us out because we were very bad about knowing when we had to sign up for stuff or when we had to turn in things. They helped us out a lot. They helped us out. Like, really fitting in would have been up to us. But in the end, when you see the people that do fit in, if they're fitting in with like the real Koreans, not the ones that have pretty good English or have lived abroad and stuff like that, but just like the ones who just grew up normally in Korea, to fit in with them, you have to be more like them, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but I'm not like them. And I tried to be, and then I realized that just it wasn't what I'm like, and I couldn't be myself and express myself. And so in turn, they couldn't understand me either. And so like, even if they had tried, I don't think there's any way it could have worked. So we ended up being very left out for our 4 years there. Yeah, at times somebody would try to approach us, but we had a few experiences where we had a friend. We were like, awesome, we have a friend. And they would hang out with us for like a month, and then poof, they just like stop hanging out and stop even saying hi to us. And we have no idea why this happened.
Maybe it was the month before an English exam they had to take.
Yeah, maybe it was that. But it was like that happened about 3 or 4 times. So then by the end of it, like a Korean would start hanging out with us. We would just be like, this is not going to last.
Obviously, Hongik is kind of known for design and fashion and those kinds of things. Would you say that the program was strong? Was there anything unique about it that you remember?
I don't have a lot of good things to say about my university, but I do believe it's working toward improving and has improved.
Well, I think that actually means a lot. If you are simply treading water, not trying to improve yourself, I mean, that demonstrates a total lack of awareness and a lack of intellectual curiosity on the institution's behalf. But, if they're taking steps forward to try to increase their profile and maybe, as you said, make it more English friendly and more international. I mean, that deserves some credit, I think.
Yeah, but I don't know where that started from because when I was there, because of Korean culture, a professor who's been there long enough eventually has this untouchable status, no matter what they do. And there was too many professors like that. We had one professor that would give these PowerPoint presentations that I swear look like the PowerPoint presentations we made in primary school. That he literally still had animations and sound effects in his PowerPoint.
Comic Sans?
Yeah, and like white text on a yellow background, which do you not teach at a design school? What the hell? One professor I particularly hated the class was photography lighting. And it was a 3-hour class. All he would do would be set up some lights, give like a really, really brief demonstration on how it works. Nothing into details. Just like basically you lift it up, here's the power setting, you shoot, and that's it. It would be no more than like a 10-minute lecture. And then he would just like give the camera off to students so they could play with the lights, and he would just chat with students about stuff completely unrelated to the class. And this was the entire semester. I didn't know what was in my power to do because, I wasn't even paying for the university, right? I didn't want to just be like that super unhappy foreigner who thinks everything's better elsewhere. But I would talk to some of my classmates, be like, am I understanding this correctly? He's just chatting after giving a 10-minute lecture, and this has been happening the whole semester.
It's not just that my Korean's bad. Like, this is actually happening, yeah.
One of the, he speaks English. One guy, he was like, yeah, that's it. And we're like, aren't you pissed off? And he's like, yeah. Then why aren't you doing anything about it? Now, I'm not sure if they did do something about it. I just wasn't there for it since I wasn't really part of like the student community and stuff. But there was a lot of that. It wasn't till the later years where they had more foreign teachers who, cared more about keeping their job and so actually wanted to teach something. There were some that weren't very good, but that's when I feel things started to get better. I don't know how much things changed in Korean classes, though.
Well, it seems that the program wasn't so bad. You were able to get a pretty decent job after you graduated. Tell us about the job hunt. So I understand that it can be sometimes difficult to get an employment visa here. What was that like for you?
Government scholarship students, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get the job-seeking visa. We do get a bit better treatment.
What is that visa called? The job-seeking visa?
The D10 visa.
D10 visa.
Yeah, you get it for 6 months and you can renew for another 6 months. We do get a bit better treatment. As far as the job hunt, I didn't want to jump into a job yet. My visa would run out as well as my savings were running out. But I wasn't actually looking for a job at the time. I had a friend who worked at this company. He mentioned that they deal with video games. I didn't even know what they did. I was just like, hey, can I get an interview? And then I actually did. And then I actually landed the job. So I never actually went.
Did you interview in Korean? Was Korean a pivotal part of what you were doing?
The company does global marketing and localization, mainly for mobile games. So they have a lot of foreigners there because a lot of what they do is like take Korean games and then market them for the rest of the world. So they need to have foreigners who understand Western culture and stuff like that so they can bring it to the rest of the world.
Global Han.
Yeah. So I don't have to speak Korean at work unless I have to deal with HR or something like that. But
is that typical? Do you know other KGSP graduates that have secured jobs where Korean is just really not demanded? My understanding is that those jobs are fast going away because Korean, at least in the international community, more and more people are learning Korean to respectable degrees. It's certainly not like it was before, where you could walk in as a white guy and get this global image and get a good paying job. I mean, certainly you still have that, but it's not nearly as widespread as it is. So, is your experience unique, or is that pretty typical?
A lot of my GKS friends left either at the end of the scholarship or before it even ended. So, yeah.
What have been some difficulties that you've encountered working at a Korean company? Or maybe not just difficulties, but some things that you really enjoy?
Generally, we don't have to abide by Korean work culture rules. The company understands that us foreigners don't accept that. There are a few things, though. And if there was anything that would come up and they wanted to make us do, we can't really fight it because we're in Korea type of thing.
Now, in terms of long-term employment opportunities, a complaint you sometimes hear is that for non-Koreans getting a job in Seoul, you're often looking at very short-term contracts with very little stability. Oftentimes, it's always kind of a struggle. Every 9 months, 10 months, you have to worry about, are they going to renew it? Are they going to renew it? How have you found long-term employment opportunities here?
Again, I didn't actually look around the job market. At my job, I could probably stay quite a bit longer if I wanted. I'm working as a designer, and I did study design, but it's not really my specialty. It's not really what I want to get into. It's just a job that popped up, and so I took it at the time. But I eventually want to move into either photography or filmmaking, which is really difficult to get a job in that area. Once I get there, I guess I will know what the long-term opportunities are. And I also don't know if I want long-term right now.
So you're a native Spanish speaker. Are there opportunities for Spanish-speaking people, or is there a demand for interpreters, or is there any type of, say, interest in the Spanish-speaking world?
Not a lot of it that I've encountered. As far as interpreting, there is Korean to Spanish interpreting, but my Korean is not at that level where I could do that. There doesn't seem to be that much interest in Latin America from the people that I've met.
Now, if you were not American and you didn't have the English skills that you have, and you came over here speaking Spanish with intermediate Korean, how do you think your opportunities would be different?
My Korean would have to get really good, because Spanish is useful, but I don't really see a lot of opportunities where you could do well with just Spanish in Korea. Well, you can do fine with just English, but just Spanish, not a lot.
So compared to when you first got here in 2011 to now, has the Spanish-speaking community, or maybe specifically the Guatemalan community, has it expanded? Has it gotten smaller? How has the character changed in the time that you've been here?
I don't know. I'm not part of that community, really. I'm not a very community-driven person. I used to meet them a bit. My first 2 years here, I would meet them every so often. They used to have this yearly event, but
now, if somebody was interested in getting to know that community more, or connecting, maybe somebody who's a student or a tourist from a Spanish-speaking country, where is somewhere they could go? Is there a particular restaurant or bar or place where you just can easily encounter others?
For a specific Guatemalan community or Spanish-speaking community?
Let's start with Guatemalan and then expand to Spanish-speaking.
If you wanted to meet Spanish-speaking people, you could just go to Hongdae at night on Friday. And hang around Mike's cabin. Yeah,
Mike's cabin. You mentioned that in the interview. What is it about Mike's cabin that makes it a hot spot for Spanish?
So here's a story a friend told me. I cannot guarantee that it's true, but here's what he told me. One of my high school friends said that Mike's cabin was not doing so well. So another guy, a Kyopo from Guatemala, another guy that I went to high school with, apparently brought his friends there and said, well, there's not a lot of people in here anyway, so can we just play our music? They started playing Latin music then. After that, he started bringing his friends because they could listen to Latin music, and that's how Mike's cabin ended up being a Latin thing. Pretty much every time I go there, I'll meet someone who asks me where I'm from because they also speak Spanish. About a third of the times, I'll meet another Kyopo from Guatemala. So yeah, if you wanted to meet Spanish-speaking people, just go there. However, there is a lot less Latin music now than there used to be. They changed DJs. I think they want to change things up, but we'll see where it goes.
Now, what about food? Is there any good Guatemalan food in Seoul?
No, it's too... Guatemalan food is just too specific of an area to.
So what makes Guatemalan food specific? What is Guatemalan food like?
Like, it's similar to, let's say, Mexican food in many ways.
So Taco Bell,
We
Chipotle,
have
or
tacos. I don't know what the specific differences are because I had Guatemalan food. I didn't have a lot of Mexican food. You don't really go that much for Mexican food in Guatemala because it doesn't end up being that different. But being here, if I wanted something closer to home, I would just go for Mexican food. And it's still very much Tex-Mex or Korean Mexican, which I avoid like the plague. But that would be the
kimchi
closest thing
tacos,
to
man.
home. Well, the kimchi fries at Vatos were all right, but it doesn't feel at all like.
Are there other Korean options in Guatemala City?
There's a few Korean restaurants. I had been to them before I came to Korea. Unless you know a Korean, they would be kind of hard to find, and being there, it would be hard to know what the hell you're ordering as well.
Right.
So,
You mentioned you're in design. Is there anything uniquely Korean about the field? I mean, you're in international marketing, but is there, say, something in architecture or photography or video design that you can watch and you can say, oh yeah, I think a Korean definitely had his hand on that?
well, if you look at apartment buildings, you can tell. They'll look the same. They're very plain as far as architecture goes. Everything here has to be cute.
Cute.
Yeah. I had this experience where our company was going to this convention in the States and they needed some brochures to take with information about our company, and we needed a graphic. And we're four designers at my company. There's Paolo and I, and then there's one Kyopo from California and one full Korean guy. We were working on the graphic, and the full Korean guy wasn't really participating. It was more our job. But he gave his input, and he just thought that what we were making looked too serious, and he thought it should be cuter. And we were like, no. Like, it will look ridiculous. Like, the Western community will want to see someone more serious. Well, for him, he just thought that we should be portraying ourselves in a cute way. But that's the way it is here. Like, so much design is either cute or imitating Scandinavian design.
Scandinavian design.
Yeah.
What is Scandinavian design?
There's a thing called international. I studied this, but I don't remember what it was called exactly. But basically, it was international typographic style. Basically, there's this minimalistic design style where you take like a white piece of paper and you take Helvetica and you put big words in black and you just write like 2 words and that's it. People do that a lot here. And Korea does have this problem with not understanding the difference between copying and creating anew. They just see a model of success and they think that they should do the exact same thing. So they copy a lot of European design, which is successful, and so their stuff just ends up looking the same, but with more nonsensical English. Yeah, or cuter. And I am so sick of it. There's so many people here that have like black clothing with big, bold, white text on it that says completely nonsensical stuff. And it's this kind of
that's Asia in general, right?
Yeah,
you can go to any Asian country and see text in English that makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, but it's the design of like black with just bold Helvetica text on it. Like if it was done a little bit, it'd be cool, but to that extent, it just kind of becomes boring and ugly. And any place that tries to be more modern in their design tends to go in that direction. And to me, they end up looking the same. Now, I know people who are more serious about design who appreciate it, and they see something that I can't see. Things that are more original, I feel like kind of get pushed out. If you're not cute, you kind of have to leave because there's no place for your stuff here.
So I think many people are aware that Korea is a world leader in fashion design. Is there another type of design that Korea is quite influential at that maybe people don't really understand or appreciate?
I say the music scene.
Music, okay.
Everything gets drowned out by K-pop and Hallyu. And so the underground music scene kind of tends to hit a wall a lot. So there's this one band we know, Love Exterior. We really like their music. They kind of feel that they want to leave Korea because
these are Koreans.
They're Korean. Their music is in English. The singer, she's very good at English somehow, but she did grow up here. And they kind of have this awkward experience. We made a music video with them, and we were talking about ideas, and they said that foreigners that like their music like that kind of Koreanness. Like when they make music videos, they like it to be more Korean than Western, in a sense. Not in the K-pop sense, but just like this Asia foreign feeling to it. But people here are more interested in something Western that's different. The rock scene here is still not, it's not in the mainstream really, especially metal. You don't meet a lot of people who listen to metal. You don't see it in mainstream media.
So you mentioned you filmed a music video for this band. What other things do you do in your free time when you're not in the office?
I'm always carrying my camera around. I actually bought this camera relatively recently because it was too difficult to take my DSLR to work in rush hour traffic. Always shooting photos when I can. And then every once in a while I will plan shoots. And then more occasionally, Pablo and I, we produce videos. Video production is way more expensive, way more time consuming, and takes a lot more people, so we're only able to do it so often.
I see your camera here is a Fuji. Is there a particular brand that Koreans really like, or maybe not Koreans, but just that is popular in the Korean photography scene?
Canon is way bigger than Nikon in Korea. You'll see a lot of people walking around with huge Canon cameras. Yeah, it's mostly Canon. And then,
any other maybe uniquely Korean things about photography here? I mean, cute maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of cute stuff. I really don't like. There's a lot of Korean street fashion photography, but it's taken a different form here where usually street fashion is walking around the streets, finding people, seeing how they're dressed and taking their photo. It's not a branch of photography I'm huge on, but that's what it is. In Korea, instead, it's planned shoots where they dress up a couple, they bring them out in the streets, and then they have them pose or act more like it was this people that you found, but it's actually a planned shoot. And the thing about street fashion is that it's not about the aesthetics, you know. It's never about the lighting and the composition. It's more about the person, how they're dressed, how they look. So when you take that into a planned shoot, it feels more stale because it's someone dressed up in a way that they're trying to sell. And since it's not a produced shoot, it's usually just a person with a big camera and an even bigger lens shooting out in the street with natural light. But they always shoot in the middle of the day. So it's really bright, really hard light. It's not particularly pleasing. It's not what most photographers would go after, but it's kind of the street fashion look. But it's very contrived and it all looks the same and it's not hard to do either. You just need like a sharp lens and expensive camera and your stuff will look like everybody else's because no one is striving for really interesting light and locations and outside the box composition. It's just like a pretty street and like straight on looking at that person and, you know, just a pretty person and that's it. I think they mostly photograph pretty people here. I think photographing pretty people is like one of the most boring things you can do.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think any country will do that.
Any country will do that, but you see very little photographing people just because they look interesting, not because they look attractive. Like somebody can be photogenic without actually being pretty, right?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
so,
these people aren't even willing to be
right.
on camera because they're like, "Oh, I'm not pretty. I don't want to be on camera." Like,
or pretty in a specifically Korean way.
That too. Like if you get on Instagram, the popular photographers a lot of the times just make pretty things. It's boring. Everything kind of looks the same. A lot of people just get a pretty girl, dress her up, put her in a room, and then just shoot that. And you know, it's not bad. Like. They did a good job technically. You know, you can tell that they know their stuff on a technical level. You
Not
see a
at the
lot of
artistic
that
level.
here. Yeah. But it sells.
Can you make a living in Seoul as a photographer?
You can. It's not easy, but as a foreigner here, there are people who need somebody who speaks English, and that is harder to find.
Do you need to speak English to press the button on the camera?
No, but you need to speak English to deal with international clients. It just saves them the effort of having to find somebody to go through. And
what kind of demand do you get? I mean, are we talking like international weddings or products or?
Mainly events, corporate events. They're boring. But
look at this older white gentleman shaking the hand of this ajashi. Yeah, we're such a global company.
Yeah, basically
in front of a big banner that says.
When you shoot these events, you have to wait for moments where they're smiling and they're either passing out business cards or shaking hands. You got to wait for these moments and shoot them. That kind of stuff. But if it's like an international client, it's a lot better for them if you can speak to them directly, as well as having more of a Western aesthetic to it instead of, I don't know, trying to make people look pretty, I guess. And I shot a wedding video last year, and it was a Korean couple, but they are actually trying to open a wedding planning business. And what they want to do is bring in more of the Western style of wedding and kind of mix it with the Korean style of wedding, because the Korean style of wedding is like, it's just like a conveyor belt machine system, and it doesn't really look that enjoyable, while as the Western one is this huge, supposedly happy party. So they want to bring more of that here. They threw this huge party, and they wanted a foreigner to shoot it so that it would be more of that. The story would be told more in a way a foreigner would tell it.
All right, we're getting towards the end of the show, which is our rapid fire section. So I'm just going to ask you several questions all in a row. You can take as long or as little time to answer them as you'd like.
All right.
What is your absolute favorite picture that you've taken while living in Seoul? And is there a place that you really like to take pictures at in general?
I've taken so many photos. I couldn't tell you a specific area, but the areas of Seoul that are older and still hold more of the Seoul identity tend to be my favorite, because like a lot of the newer, nicer areas, they're nice to be in, but they make a boring photo. I'll just mention one photo is one that I took. I was walking around Haebangchon with my past roommate, and then we just ended up finding this like hidden market. It was just like, if you go down the stairs and all of a sudden you find yourself in this long dark corridor, and it was a market there, and there was just a little bit of light coming in, and then my roommate just kind of stopped and looked up at one moment, and I shot that, and it was...
It's in Haebangchon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know which market you're talking about.
And it's like up the hill.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite photos. Yeah. So there's those kind of areas that I really like, but they're disappearing.
What kind of Guatemalan food, fashion, TV show, any type of cultural export do you think would do really well in Korea that you don't see it at all?
I think traditional textiles, people would find them very interesting here. I think people here would do interesting things with them, incorporating it into their own fashion. It could be considered cultural appropriation, and the lines of that are very blurry, but you find...
Racism doesn't exist here.
Yeah.
You can still do blackface on Gag Show, right?
Yeah, right. But I mean, as far as how Guatemalans would feel about it, I'm not so sure.
What is your absolute least favorite thing about living in Korea?
I think the hierarchy culture. I think it had a place in time, but at this point, it's holding a lot of young people back. Especially me, like, I look much younger than I really am. Like, a lot of people are like, aren't you 16?
I was going to go 13, but...
Yeah, I get that a lot. So...
we're going for a diverse audience. Or, I'm sorry, we're going for a diverse guest list here, so, I don't judge.
I'm 24, but a lot of people will guess that I'm between 13 and 18. In Korea, that means that I get treated like I know so much less. My other friend, Pablo... He's a year younger than me, but he looks like he could be 30. Now, for a lot of people, this would be a terrible thing, but for him in Korea, he likes it because when we were in Hongdae, some people thought he was a professor. He will tend to avoid the conversation of how old he is, because if people just assume his age, they will give him so much more knowledge bias. I don't know what I would call it.
Ageism.
Yeah.
Positive ageism, reverse ageism, whatever you want to call it. Would you recommend living in Korea to your typical Guatemalan?
Yes, even though I think it's very difficult for them. I think I did better being half Chinese, being able to experience some Asian culture before. I would recommend to anybody to live in a country that's completely different from their own, because completely changes your worldview and lets you realize how different people can be, as well as things that you always assumed are normal or the right way to do, you begin to question. And you can always learn from that culture, see what does work, what doesn't work. And like, really, it really helps you break that, well, I'm doing this because that's how we've always done it and that's what seems right, to I can change the way I do things because I've seen how that can be different and I can do better.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Settlers of Seoul podcast. If you'd like to connect with Wesley, you can find him on Instagram at Wesley Chang Photo. That's Chang. His website, westchangphoto.com, or email him at wesleychangphoto@gmail.com. He does take requests, so if you have an event or a meeting, or if you need a middle-aged white guy to shake your hand in front of a banner, he's your guy. And just some quick housekeeping. If you like the show, please rate us on iTunes, like us on Facebook, get the word out, however you can. It's the fastest way to help grow our audience and hopefully get more guests on the show. Thank you so much.